Coming to you live, but not really. It is all pomp and no circumstance with Ryder Richards on LetUsThinkAboutIt.com, the amateur hour you should never tune into.
Welcome back. This is Ryder Richards with Let Us Think About It. So today, we're going to talk about truth as an abstraction, boosted to the transcendent realm, and how from such heights, we're launched into an orbit of lies, known as Baudrillard's simulacra. Now, last episode, I kind of pitched this idea as like a shape idea, right? That reality can act as a net between truth and the simulacra. Now, this episode, we're going to look at it more like a ladder, a different shape. This is reality climbing into truth and further afield into artificiality and lies. So sometimes a socio-historic grounding kind of helps position these things. So let's start with this one. Humanism believes in people and using reason and science, much more so than bowing down to the edicts of religion or God. Now, this belief, once it becomes paired up with liberal freedom and natural rights, it shifts into individualism. This is the power of the individual, which really starts to shed reason and science in favor of how people perceive the world. Suddenly, the subjective views and feelings of the individual are more valid, more valuable than anything such as God or rationality. But then again, maybe not as important as money. So let's keep that in mind. Anyway, this cannot help but create relativism, while simultaneously, with, of course, the help of academic post-structuralism and deconstructionism as our theories keep evolving, it somehow breaks down stable communication. And this is for reasons we can discuss later, next episode. But this all creates a failure of good faith communication based on multiplying shifting contexts and values. There's just too much going on. Now, this is a very high-level overview of where we are right now. In short, we have gained so much truthiness, we can actively undermine truth itself. Now, this is really kind of the reverse of pulling yourself up by your own bootstraps. It's more like cutting off the tree branch while you're sitting on it. But this truth undermining, it's not undermining reality. And why is that? Because, of course, truth is an abstraction, while reality is, well, real, and occasionally it reminds us of it by sort of bonking us or something. But in this confusion of truth, fact, reality, reason, right, correctness, we sort of reveal something really worth looking at here, and not just the language game. We begin to see what people are afraid of and how they manipulate. That is human nature, and that points us to our own blind spots. So today we're going to look at the abstractions of truth and how it transcends and why we let it transcend, and how this leads to belief, which we can actually kind of consider good faith lies. We're also going to look at the simulacra a bit to show how, really contrary to last episode, it extends further from belief into what we can call bad faith truths. As examples today, we're going to touch on Plato's cave and science as just another cave. I'm also going to relate a story about artists lamely attempting to cite quantum physics and how that happens. Then we're going to talk a little bit about Zizek's take on the apocalypse, catastrophe, and revelation as escapist fantasy. And all of this is to consider our migration from reality and truth outwards into the simulacra. Now, this is, of course, only really half the episode today, and we're going to complete the rest next time by discussing Matthew Crawford pointing out Immanuel Kant's humanist agenda, especially as compared to Thomas Hobbes and Isaac Newton's more mechanistic ideas. And as well, I'm going to offer a short follow-up next episode with a couple of sort of tools or models that can really help us pinpoint at what step on the map to ignominy we misstooped? I don't know. Lacking words today. Part 1, Shadow Play. Drawing from last episode, Step 79, Skipping Reality, I propose that reality is a necessary filter for abstractions. I was playing with the idea that on one side of reality is religion and science, and on the other side is superficial simulacra. Reality is the net or hurdle that somehow filters out the worst excesses of abstractions. Now, as a recap, I said science and religion are more profound ideologies that attempt to offer a framework and system for discovering how the world works. They are, at their best, sincerely looking for truth that may at some point attain this sort of theoretical universal status, immanent truths, transcendent knowledge. They're serious, they're heavy, they're deep, and yet, inevitably, they're not reality because they draw from reality as their source material. They are actually a stand-in, a story of abstractions derived from process and formulas and human nature. But they do attempt to offer insight. And that is, and I think for me, this is very important, they offer revelations about the world. Now, Plato's cave is this kind of analogy about being captured by shadow play, caught up in a story instead of facing reality. Unfortunately, science and religion, which we kind of think might be turning around from the play and stepping into the light, these can also become a story, a shadow play in themselves, that claims access to deeper reality, a more profound means of being. Yeah, but we really cannot verify it ourselves. And when I say that, what I mean is, who in the world has access to an electron microscope? Don't answer that. Or maybe God's ear. Don't answer that either. And thus, we must really rely on others for our own truths. So the unprovability here means that we must, as a step forward on a mental process, decide to believe what we're told. We must take it on faith. Okay, so last episode when I pitted science and religion against advertising and simulacra, truthiness versus lies, with one reality here in the middle, well, we must be aware that both sides can really move the world. Now that's kind of an interesting notion because belief in religion and science, they both attempt to offer answers. They move the world, but also the utility of clever storytelling, something that stokes desire and inflame lies, also moves the world. Now, the distinction for simplicity, for me, is the truth of science and religion should be trying to reveal reality. That's revelation. Like good psychology or Buddhism or principles of electricity, for instance. That's what should be going on here. Now, on the other hand, the marketing campaign of the simulacra, it may contain truth, but it uses it as a kind of springboard, jumping higher up, like really away from reality into the obscuring clouds. It's attempting distance, and then it goes through the clouds into orbit. Yeah, and I know how marketing works. Because, of course, I do it for a living. And, of course, propaganda works as well. These things have real-world results. But the distinction here is that the simulacra is an addition to reality. It doesn't reveal, it obscures. If anything, it works best by making us focus on ourselves while creating a type of amnesia. We somehow become self-centered idiots in the midst of it. And once we're walking on the clouds, we become scared to look down, lest reality set in, and like Wile E. Coyote, gravity returns. So one last point. The transcendental and simulacra, they are abstractions. So they communicate really well with each other. What's interesting about this is abstraction to abstraction has less friction than interfering reality here. And this puts them really at odds with the real. They are in ways reliant on the real, but antagonistic to it. An abstraction's ultimate success is escaping gravity, the friction of reality. To do so, they must really create a world that champions belief and desire. They must normalize that, which means downplaying the persistent contradictions that bubble up, especially when somebody forgets to sort of identify completely with their chosen ideology, their chosen abstraction. Now, yeah, from this point of view, we see that it's really not that science or religion reveals anything, it abstracts something, which, no matter what, is a layer of obfuscation or reduction, no matter how well intended it is. The unfortunate part of this is there's not two sides, truth versus lies, with reality in the middle. There's no didactic, but rather it's a chain of escalating series of assumptions, climbing further and further away from reality. This is a procession from reality to ontology to epistemology. Part 2. Quantum Physics in Art. So, quantum physics, right? Yeah, it's cool, huh? Yeah. I mean, honestly, some science fiction is probably more believable than quantum physics. It's crazy. Now, let's say, first off, let me give you my bona fides here. Sometimes I read about it, but I'm like a headlines kind of reader about it because I don't totally get it. It's kind of like sci-fi for me in that sense. I can really explain the fantastical worlds I encounter, but also kind of like economics or astrology or God or even Bitcoin. I see it all as a belief system sanctioned by some really smart folks and some really wacky seekers without a whole lot of bearing on reality. What I'm interested in is the appeal of quantum mechanics to those who do not understand actual mechanics. Yes, it's more exciting. But it isn't like most people work their way up to it using textbooks, right? Instead, they could easily latch on to the abstract theoretical principles of freedom that somehow become invoked by the quantum realms, the multiverse and string theory, the Heisenberg uncertainty principle. And yet, we somehow struggle horribly with daily life. Elements such as electricity, air conditioners, or toilets are mysterious, right? They're more mysterious than the multiverse. To make this more philosophical, let's consider this as a movement within the ontic, ontology. Ontology is really about studying being and what exists and how it's measured. Now, the ontic divides what I'm talking about into two things: concrete entities and abstract entities. Concrete is, of course, like the moon, water, electricity. Abstract is like emotions, God, dreams, or quantum theory. From there, we get into how we know what we know, or epistemology. An episteme is kind of like a paradigm. It actually refers to knowledge, to science or a reasoned out body of knowledge, which is intellectually certain at a given time. Now, this is not necessarily common sense or a true opinion, but this is foundational knowledge during a time. So maybe like flat Earth during a time and now round Earth. Yeah, so ontology is both concrete and abstract things that we study. But the study of study is epistemology, which really creates these epistemes or moments of time where people agree on what's going on and how to think about it. The Earth is definitely flat. Now, any of you who know me know that I love abstract conceptual ideas and knowledge. I'm actually more drawn to sci-fi and quantum theory than I am air conditioners and toilets, right? Still, I'm also an artist and a woodworker who, while engaged in the episteme, that is the intellectual knowledge of our time, encounters reality physically through craft, through the building and making in reality. This is also known as techne, practice, craft, or attending to reality. That's why it's a practice. Here's a story for you about artists. These people tend to be an odd combination of dreamer, maker, and thinker. Now, a few years back, I went to an artist residency, and every artist there was either making art that was about identity politics, which is really kind of mining your culture and history for content to make a point about society or marginalization or victimization, or everyone was making abstract art. I started thinking about this. Now, when you ask what the abstract art is about, because it needs to be an abstraction of something, right? They said it was about quantum physics, string theory, time travel, or the multiverse. So overall, there were lots of references to the unknowability of reality as a profound reason to, I don't know, paint rainbows and call it time travel. A lot of that was going on. Now, the interesting thing is, by claiming science, it freed up the artists to make anything they want. But also, they got to kind of sound sciencey and a little bit new agey and kind of smart all at the same time while having no sort of borders or parameters. Now, what struck me was how they didn't actually understand the basic ingredients of paint. And there are a lot of problems with how humidity would affect their work. But yeah, they could claim somehow that dark matter and quarks were fundamental to their practice. It's weird because it's like they just jumped a few rungs without actually learning the intervening steps. So obviously, you know this right now. This is me being a little bit shitty about a lack of intellectual rigor amongst a group of people who can at times be very compassionate. but there's also times when they can be quite self-righteous and in sort of proclaiming an access to the truth. But this example explains how most of us have moved from reality. We've hopped over truth entirely, and we've just sort of parasitically glommed onto a weighty abstraction, riding its coattails for our own ends. Now, writers like Chad Dawkins, he's written about how artists, those at the pinnacle of style and aesthetics, the bringers of new ideas, yada yada, how they attempt to align themselves with the hard sciences. And this is to firm up their own softness, their own lack of social academic prestige. Artists, me included, gain some sort of insight and present it as intelligent. This is camouflage as very thin paint indeed. Snap back to reality. Oh, there goes gravity. What we really love is when the tough, rigid limits of reality are proven malleable. That is, when hard science says, I don't know. That's really what we wanted all along, right? An excuse to really float free from the rigid rules of reality obliquely. We have been made free, unstable, and multiple at the highest theoretical levels. It's like we're all on shrooms. It's also kind of like we went to ask one parent, and when they said no, we just went and found somebody else to say yes. Sure, there is an objective reality. A chair is still a chair. But from these kind of theoretical heights that we tend to exist in, and especially through academia, reality is so complicated, it becomes once again mystical, mysterious. Your observations make the world, Heisenberg. You have really become Plato's shadows, ensnaring others with your dreams. The shadow play is etched onto the top of the clouds as we move. We're not looking for reality any longer. We're making myth. We're wielding the language of truth, the shape of truth, but with no fidelity to it. Part 3, Catastrophe to Apocalypse. And so, we're back at the Transcendental Ideology. Took a little while to get there, right? And this is the Transcendental Ideology as it escapes the actual mechanics of reality, that is, of ontology. It's moved beyond it. So, Zizek, Slavoj Zizek, he talks about a lot of this in his article From Catastrophe to Apocalypse and Back. He also talks about it in Sex and the Failed Absolute. That's just one of Zizek's things, is to sort of recycle his own content, where he actually says that relativity theory and quantum mechanics, complex intellectual work on the origins of the world, has absolutely no bearing on reality. It is a radical derangement. It's what Heidegger would call a catastrophe. Now, in a reversal, we need the promised apocalypse. The discourse or disclosure of doom is necessary. That is, the apocalypse is really a revelation of the end more than the actual catastrophe. So to pause on that just for a second, a revelation means that the thing, the apocalypse, was always there. We're just now revealing it. Now, consider that the apocalypse isn't an event. It's simply seeing what is already here. We're already in it. Revelation merely opens our mind up to the possibility. It allows us to imagine, which allows us to then see the apocalypse currently happening. That's right, reality is the apocalypse. No wonder we want some abstractions. Reality is terrifying. Now, the catastrophe, whether a natural disaster or epiphany that we witness, such as maybe truly glimpsing reality, it is necessary to drive us to establish universal rules. So the catastrophe drives us to establish universal rules. Now, to develop these universal rules, these abstractions, it's really to make tools that allow us to deny reality. Abstractions allow us to deny reality. And this is only possible because we imagine an end of normalcy. We envision an end of realism. So our imagining of the end, however it is, shapes the orders, the rules, universals that allow us to believe. To bypass reality, we imagine, develop tools and rules, and we allow ourselves to be bound to a nonsensical ideology. Even if nonsense, we deem it preferable to reality. So to clarify, the human condition is to use our escapist fantasy so that we may disregard reality. I've repeated this quite a bit, but I'm hoping it's sticking here because it's a tricky one. Now, we envision a disaster and bend our imaginings into denying it. We deny death, we deny hard truths, we deny our desires to hurt others. And oddly, this blindness to ourselves for our fantasy allows us not to just allow, but to champion atrocities, to conflate horror with justice, because we end up believing our own shit. Now, this is precisely the fear of brutal reality and our subsequent imagining that really gives rise to the universal, the idea of the universal. We suddenly must care desperately about what is beyond reality, which perhaps we shouldn't care about at all. The abstract transcendent universal becomes our primary point of concern because we cannot face our smallness, our pettiness. So we turn our gaze to the transcendental horizon. We strike a hero's pose, and we only acknowledge squalid reality from on high. Okay, thanks for sticking with me. It took a while to warm up to the deep stuff on this episode, but I hope you enjoyed it. Next time, I will reveal how Kant started all this. Yeah, Immanuel Kant here reimagined us into a universal transcendent self, which allows us a feeling of sovereignty by avoiding aspects of reality. Then I'm going to discuss two different ladders. This is the ladders of inference and abstraction, which is a cognitive decision process that we can use to fool ourselves, but can also be used to correct our assumptions. Now, I still need to get a bit more into the language problem involved in all these ideas, since of course it is an abstraction used for communication, and its slippery nature allows for some really colossal catastrophes. Now, that should all be out in a few days, and of course, you know my request here. Please like, rate, review, and share this episode with a friend, or two, or three. All right, until next time, this is Ryder Richards with Let Us Think About It. Yeah, transcending my desire to transcend.